First of all, thank you very much for allowing us to come and talk about this. I did a similar yet shorter talk at GDC about taking investment. And I just wanted to follow up. I think we think a lot about creating pitch decks, but not often about what happens to a pitch deck when we send it to a publisher or an investor. So I just wanted to explore that as a set of process and, in a way, introduce ourselves. So, my name is Gina Jackson, and this is Matt, my co founder. We've worked in games for a very long time, both as publishers and developers. In fact, I met Matt in 2000 when we were working at Nokia in the very early days of mobile games. When I was working for Nokia and Matt was developing WAP games. Shows how long ago it was. And today I really just wanted to explore the pitch analysis process. So once you send the pitch and you've met the scout, what happens? And I've drawn it out as a very garish set of or a process flow going through each stage. And I just wanted to step through each stage and have a look. This is something that publishers may do, but also if you're considering doing self-publishing, I think this is a useful process to go through to understand how to make your game as successful as possible from both a unit sales point of view, but also a generating revenue point of view. I do realise that not every game is made to be commercial, but certainly if you're looking for a publisher or an investor, then you need to start thinking commercially. So the first stage I'm going to look at there is the pitch screening. So what happens once you've met the scout and what will they do with your game? So with the pitch screening, it's normally a very quick pass to see if it fits the strategic acquisition criteria that they have. This may be based on a budget or a genre or a release date. And they may be looking at how it would fit within their overall portfolio. And on this, it's normally a quick decision, but if you have the right detail held within your pitch deck, then you're able to see how that filters through. So a clear and concise pitch really helps if you're communicating the core idea and the hook. If you're very generic, you feel like a Me Too title, or it's unclear on any of the core detail, then it's likely to fail that screening. So once you've passed through that, we head here into the market analysis. Is it going to work well for the publisher, and are you really thinking about the audience for your game and how you're going to reach that audience? So if we step through that market analysis. So one of the first things, and obviously every publisher and investor has a different set of criteria that they go through, but these core steps are very similar across the board. So one of the things they'll be looking for is the unique selling point, the winning features of the game, and how that can be communicated, because you may have a really good game, but it's really, really hard to communicate that. So by identifying the thing that makes it unique and the core hook, it makes it much easier to communicate to an audience what you're doing. Obviously, discoverability is massively challenging, particularly at the moment with so many games going out, and particularly if you're looking at Steam as your primary format, then making something stand out, making so that you can talk about it easily on social media is really important. So unique is a very special word that I think is often overlooked, but easy to explain. Hooks differentiates from the competitors and memorable. I think when we go through and have a look at a lot of games, and when you look at the kind of volume of pitches that scouts are looking at, particularly at events, if they can remember your game at the end of the event or come back to you and go, oh, that was that game, the one with the cat that did somersaults, or the one with something, if they can remember it and communicate it in an easy form to someone else, that really helps with showing that it's standing out from the crowd. So once they've worked out the USP, and you can go further on USPs and you can look at how that is attracting players to your game. So what is it that's making it stand out that someone's going to come and have a look and play the demo and maybe go from the demo to the full paid version? And on the flip side of that, what's going to keep players in your game? So what features have you got that are doing those two very different things? If you're looking at attracting players, it might be something as simple as the art style that you've got is very striking, or the character that you've got is very memorable. Whereas a feature that's going to retain players is going to be much more about depth of gameplay, or it's going to be around leaderboards or replayability or competition. So it's just working out how you can communicate those very easily. Once you've worked out your USPs and your core hooks, you can move on from there to benchmarking. And this is really comparing your games to other successful titles, and creating a list of comparators, because that's what's going to be useful within working out just how many units you're likely to be able to sell and at what price point and what features they have compared to what you have. Um, every every decision that a publisher is going to make is eventually going to be down to the commercials of the game that you've got. If you can list the comparative titles, they'll do their own benchmarking anyway, but if you can provide that within the pitch deck, that's really useful. It's often very hard to make good comparisons, and it's quite easy to go and start looking at what's on, for example, Steam, and getting insights into games that are similar to yours, either have similar mechanics or art style or within the genre. So again, there I think there's also, it's very simple and often low cost to go and have a look at the insights. So go and have a look at the reviews, what people are saying about games that are similar to yours, what players like, what players find frustrating or confusing that you may be able to resolve or improve on in the game that you've got. I know lots of people have very different opinions of Gen AI. It's incredibly good, though, for getting insights into other games and dealing with big data. So personally, I find Gen AI really good for going to do analysis and sentiment finding on reviews. And again, not difficult to set up. So you've got an idea of how big the market is from doing your benchmarking. And then you can go and have a look at the market itself. So what's the demand and the audience size for what you've got? Have you got a good idea of what platform you're putting it on, what the trends are? Is that a genre that's growing? Is it contracting? What kind of people are playing the kind of game that you're putting out? What are they interested in? Where would you find them? What communities do they live in? Because at the end of the day, you might have the best game, but if you can't find an audience for it, then it's going to really struggle to be commercial. If you can provide a strong evidence of that audience, so who that target demographic are, what other games they like, where they hang out, even if you can find them on social media and you can find out how to communicate with them, so what kind of content engages them, those are really good traction tools that you can provide as part of your pitch deck to give you a level of evidence that's going to help an investor say, aha, they've worked out the secret sauce for this game. They've worked out how to communicate to people who are really interested in this kind of game with these kind of features. And once the market analysis has been done around the demand, then you can start to look at, is the game you've been sent any good? So what's the quality marker that's going to come back? How are people going to review it? What's the Metacritic likely to be? Have you play tested it? Have you got any demo data on it? How many times maybe has the demo been downloaded? What's the play length of people playing the demo? What's the feedback that they've given you on that? Anything that you can provide that's proving that this game is going to be of high quality is important there. So that takes us through that very first stage where a game can be rejected at that stage from just the idea of whether this game is suitable. So particularly if you're trying to work out which of a game concept or you've done games through game jams that you're going to follow, then excuse me, doing this kind of analysis of yourself. So is this a market that I'm going to be able to make back money from because it's of a large enough size, or I can make a game of a high enough quality where I'm going to get sales? Those kind of things are really important. And although publishers tend to have access to more tools than an indie dev has, there are still a lot of tools available that are free, or where you can do your own analysis. So the next stage I want to look at is really around delivery and what risks are there around the delivery of the game itself. So people talk about trust, but it's really what have you put in place for your project planning and your mitigation and your risk strategy to enable you to deliver a game. So if I look here at team assessment, what's the team makeup? What's their background? What skills do they have? How much confidence do I have in this team to be able to deliver? And again, it's easy to say that, oh, I have loads of confidence in a really experienced team and that makes them really low risk. But even if you are a new team, there are ways of mitigating that. It's quite easy to set up an advisory board, or set up mentors for different members of the team, or even set up to have consultants in who'll come and support in a particular area. Maybe online multiplayer or crossplay is something that you want to implement, but you don't have the experience. That maybe that you've gone in and got some tech support, or that you've worked up a prototype to prove that you can solve that problem really easily. It's all about de-risking and working out what information that you've got to de-risk it. And it shows that you've thought about the whole delivery pipeline and your abilities to do that, rather than going in saying, I'm super confident, I know I can deliver all of this. None of us have all the skills to do everything. Very few single person teams are able to deliver things. So it's looking at how you surround yourself with a multitude of skills to be able to deliver. And the second part of that is the delivery risk analysis. So will the game ship successfully? How have you set up your project? And in this, I also include cash flow. People often forget about the cash flow and the stress of paying staff, and how, if you're considering all the time how you're going to pay your staff, you're not thinking about how you deliver the game. So have you set yourself up for success? Have you got the right scope? Have you got realistic timeframes? I've worked with lots of developers who've spent the first part of their development cycle just working out literally how long it takes to create some of the core building blocks, and then reassessing their project plan as they go along. So they're constantly reviewing the time it takes to make small parts of the project, so they know that delivery time can get better and better. Milestone review obviously makes sense, but sometimes that some of those milestones are really high risk. They're things you've never done before. And you can link that again with the cash flow. So when you've got a really risky milestone, you can make sure that you've got a longer runway to deliver that milestone, so that you're not going to be in a situation where you're constantly worrying about delivery and payment and how that's going to work. So that gives us a really good idea. We know the market and the market analysis and the benchmarking, and now we've looked at the delivery and the team and the project planning that we've got in place. If both of those things are still looking good, then we can look purely at the numbers. So what's the commercial side of this game that we're doing? Where do we sit with the return on investment, or the P&L, the profit and loss? And how on earth do we forecast how much this game is going to make? So I've broken this down into some of the key areas. The first one being forecasting. So how will it perform? How on earth do you go ahead and predict some of those commercial performances? I think more and more people are beginning to publish this stuff online, so you get a good idea. But as soon as we begin to get a stable methodology, then people tend to game that, and then we have to carry on looking for new methodologies. It's particularly happened with wish listing, but there are other ways to predict forecasting. And we're hoping, and one of the things that Matt and I are really concerned about is how to make that forecasting more transparent and how to provide free tools to developers to help everyone being able to come up with a good idea of the number of units and the amount of revenue that you can make. So that's the next stage that publishers will do, is around that sales forecasting. You can decide whether you want to forecast your own units within your pitch deck. Personally, I wouldn't put it in, but I would have done the calculation myself. I think most publishers have their own methodology, but if you're going in asking for money, it's a really good idea for you to understand the kind of return on investment that you are asking your investor for. So if you're asking for 100,000 euros, you need to be comfortable in your mind that you are going to be able to get at least 500,000 euros back. So publishers normally look at a return between 3 and 5 times the investment, whereas venture capitals are looking more like 10 times that. So 10 times return on investment, but they're looking at investing in the company rather than the project itself. And then the commercial evaluation. So you've got the forecast from the previous process. Now you need to compare the forecast with the cost structure. So how much was the game going to cost you? So that would be the advance that you're asking for, but it would also be all the other go-to-market costs. So probably QA, localization, maybe localization testing. The overheads you'd be getting from the publisher are often included. So whether that's the time for a producer or the finance team, a general overhead that would be included. And then the other big one is marketing. So how much are you going to set aside for marketing? Is that 15% of the advance? Is it 8% of the expected revenue? All publishers have a slightly different model, but understanding what that cost structure is compared to the expected forecast in sales is going to leave you with a return on investment. And the final part of this is looking at the portfolio strategy. So when you go to a publisher, there's two parts of this. One, they have other games already, so they have an audience that they're tapping into. So with that audience, is this looking at a game that's going to fit that same audience who they're already talking to? So they're already an existing customer. Or is it looking at a completely different customer base? This means that with their social media, they're going to have to find new followers, and look at how they're going to understand where those people live and what's interesting to them. So it's much easier for them to find a game that may fit with their existing audience who they're already talking to. Once they found out that, or once they've worked out that, they can connect your game with some of their existing games. So could they wrap a demo that you're doing with a piece of DLC that someone else is doing for an existing game? Can they cross-sell it with their database of customers? Could they do a competition where they tie the two things together, so they could sell some of their existing portfolio and get an upsell on that side if they take your game, or vice versa, your game may be able to help the sales of their existing games. And that's just sort of an add-on benefit to what they're doing, but can be the thing that tops a game or moves a game to a point where it's really worthwhile doing for them. So just to go back to that process, they'll start off with that screening. They'll then have a look at the market and see how big that is and what size of the opportunity. They'll check the risk and the skill sets of the team to make sure that you can do the delivery, both that you can deliver it to a quality but deliver it on time and on budget. Then they'll do the calculations around the return on investment against the cost base that they've got for that game, and then probably take it into a green light meeting. And this normally brings together all the different elements within a publisher to see how comfortable they are. There's also often an element of, do we think we can work with this team? Do we want to work on this title for the next 18 months, 2 years? Good publishers will want to make sure that there is a general good feeling before they start, and they have this real advantage that there are so many games for them to choose from. We talk to publishers all the time, and we find out that they probably sign between 6 to 13 games a year, and they're probably looking at between 3 and 5,000 pitches. So if a game doesn't meet the pitch screening and the market and the delivery and the ROI, they still have more games than they know what to do with. So they'll pick the ones that they feel really comfortable with because they're going to be working on them a long time. And the final stage is once they've been through that ROI or that green light meeting, then they'll go to a contracting stage. So even after the green light meeting, there's a chance that the game won't be signed because you may not agree terms. So the royalty rate that you have, or the recoupment royalty rate, or the marketing commitment may still be stumbling blocks after you've gone through all these other areas to get to this point. So I've just summarized here some of the key questions that are being asked at different stages and the output. And again, this might be useful just as a checklist, particularly when putting together a pitch. So will the players care about your game? And they might, and you might know that they will really care, but unless you can put that in a way that is easily understood by the scout when they're searching through all of these pitches, finding a positioning statement or a really memorable way that people are going to recall your game is vitally important. Benchmarking, can you put in those comparable titles that gives them an idea of what success looks like? I see a lot of pitches every year. I probably see 1,000 pitches a year, but often people will put in comparable titles that are never going to be achievable. So as much as they need to be ambitious, they also need to be within the realms of what you're delivering. So whether it's art style or quality level or playtime of the game, we need to give something that's actually comparable. And if there is nothing, then you're basically going and you're saying, I need you to take a massive risk on this game because we think there's a market. And if that's the case, you can back that up with evidence. You've taken it to play testing, you've done some social media engagement work, and you've had a real blow up on social media on an image or a GIF or some way that you've communicated the game that seems to really be getting traction. And traction is vitally important these days. So being able to do that can mitigate that idea of not having benchmark. Market, is there going to be a demand for your game? What is the market size? There's a chance that your game might be really successful compared to the costs, but that's not going to make it worthwhile the publisher putting, a team of people on it. They'll be putting a marketeer, they'll be putting a producer, they'll be allocating QA. Do they do one big game instead of two small games? So it's really understanding the kind of size of what they're doing and if it's really worth their time. People often think that product validation and play testing is the most important element of the game, and the game signing of a game. Actually, it's a tenth of the importance, and I think we have to make people aware that that's just an element, and often the team's not good enough, or the market doesn't look strong enough. The game may be really good to play, but it may be super hard to communicate. Then you look at the team. Can they deliver? Do they have the right skill set? Do they understand themselves? And how can you mitigate that risk? The risk assessment around the delivery times and how you can deliver, and what project planning skills that you've got. Forecasting, the trickiest one, and I would say an art rather than a science still, but hopefully we can get better information and more transparency over how forecasting can work. And then commercials. Once you have an idea of the forecast, what's the break even, and what's the return on investment figure, you should be aiming for at least 5 times for a publishing deal. And if you can make it higher than that, then they'll start to get excited if it's fitting in the kind of market that they're looking at. And then portfolio, it's just a bonus. Does it strengthen them? Is it a strategic fit? Has it got the same audience? Is it something that their audience will get excited about? I don't know whether to pause there and see if there are any questions or to go a little bit further. Well, should we see if anyone's got any questions on this? Is anyone currently pitching to publishers? So to link that back to what Matt and I do, we currently have $12.5 million worth of publisher opportunities available free to developers on our website. So if anyone's looking for up to 3 million in investment, particularly interesting there, we have one from Team 17. They've got finishing funding for a game this year. So if you've got a game that's close to completion, whether a publisher's fallen out or whether you were thinking about doing self-publishing, but now you're beginning to think, actually, I could do with a powerhouse behind it. They're looking for a title to come up before the end of the year, and they have a budget of up to 3 million in development costs to support that being released. And again, you can submit that directly for free through our development portal. Green Man Gaming have got budgets up to 1.5 million, as do Quali. And then Curve, 500,000. If you're doing a management game, then Excalibur are looking particularly for simulation and management. Miniclip are also looking for PC title. And they get a lot of mobile, but not very many PC. So they're really keen to see more than that.
Just point out these are really hard to read. So if you want to see these in much more detail, then they're on the front page of Pitchify.
And if you have a game that's really good for streamers, then Yogscast is the place, because obviously they have a whole stable of streamers. Oh. That's all right. And then, I mean,
yeah, I was about to ask if some of this can be shared, because I also have developer colleagues who would like to know more about this. I'm part of an incubator program where they're training game teams to create better games.
Absolutely.
Nice.
This is all freely available. It's all public. When anyone registers on our site, we just have a quick look through and make sure that they're a proper developer. If they're a student developer, that's fine. We want to support new people coming into the industry too. And if you're part of an accelerator, we do have mentoring facilities on the on the site. So we find that a lot of new developers, we ask a lot of questions, and that tends to spook new developers. So we can give rights for mentors to be able to sort of review the detail that people put on the site before it's submitted, which can give the confidence people need to do to hit the submit button.
Ah, that's wonderful. I've been also thinking that it would be an interesting thing to send in pitch decks or information to publishers. I'm currently in the stage that I do not have a ready demo. I do have a prototype, but I do not have my my technical part of the team decided to change the game engine, so we don't currently have a fully polished playable, so that they would get the good idea of the demo. So there is a prototype, and I can take some video, but there are still some things that I would like to fix. And I think you had the date. I think people were asked to apply before the end of the month. So
Yeah,
I was wondering if, yeah.
We'll have new ones next month.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah. but also I think submit stuff. I'll just have a little look at the next. If I look at the next page, these are some of the questions that we ask, whether that be around intellectual property and legalities of things, or the amount of funding people are looking for, or the amount of tools. We're basically just a big checklist. And once you fill it in and publish it, then you can update it as often as you like, and just republish it. So again, put stuff up, wait for a reaction, update it as soon as you get new stuff, or just update it, and they'll see it and they'll start chatting with you. Most scouts are very reasonable, and if they see something they like in a prototype, they can recognize something that's great and they're going to enjoy, and they'll ask you for a vertical slice or what comes next. So I would say put stuff up as early as you can and then have the conversation.
Lovely.
Anyone else?
Oscar has posted a thing saying anyone that these publishers have written down. I mean, you can see them, I say, straight on the front of Pitchify.games. Good to hear you're interested. As Gina said, the sooner you get the information on the system, the better. It's really understanding whether or not someone is interested in your product, but more importantly, whether or not your product hits the points that we talked about earlier on. So around market and competitors and thinking about things like that as well is really important. And again, the page that Gina just showed where we ask a lot of those questions, they will prompt you to do that research.
I have been also thinking about publishers. If I've understood that they would like to have a demo, but for the second project of the game team, I've been thinking about if it would make sense to have a couple of ideas or pitch decks, or if it would be worth it to invest in developing one idea further rather than having two not so fleshed out or three not so fleshed out ideas.
A publisher is always going to ask for more. So I think if you start with 3 ideas and then work out which one you can get some of those market evidence pieces with before you develop a prototype. You're using the same process that they use to decide what they're going to sign, with you working out which of your ideas you want to do further work on. And then if you've got a working demo, just something they can play and get an idea of what you're thinking on, then that's what they're going to publish. But as soon as you create something, they'll want to ask for more, whatever it is, because they can. That makes sense.
They'll always want to have a better idea of what's coming up. So.
Yeah.
And and they want they're happy. They're always happy for you to do more work on a project without funding it. So there's always that kind
Yeah.
of.
So be careful.
Yeah, they're happy for you to spend your own money testing your game. So it's using a very crassly commercial viewpoint is having a stalking horse, or if you're talking to one, then having another one that's also interested in that game will often make people move faster.
So just to reiterate, the people that we have here are just the people who have got these open calls, but there are other publishers on our platform who are searching for games, who at the moment just don't want to be public what they're looking for. And you get to choose how visible your game is. So we've given you total control. So you can have it in stealth mode that only you get to decide who you send it to, or you can have it searchable on the platform so that any of the publishers that have been approved, so we know that they're a serious publisher and they've got money, whether that's to spend on marketing or to spend on marketing and development. Then they will be searching in the background. They'll be notified when new games come on the platform, and then they can chat to you through the platform.
I've got a couple of things that I've jotted down as you were going through as sort of tips and tricks and stuff, if you're interested in those as well. One of the things I noted down was when we were talking about kind of how to be memorable when you're having meetings or when you're sending things or submitting games. One of the things that I often say people should do is come up with a really memorable and very short sentence. There is an old adage, which is that if you can't describe what you're doing in 9 words, then it's probably too complicated. So kind of really, really working hard and really crafting. Maybe you can go with more than 9 words, but a short sentence. But a short sentence that will stick in people's heads. So using very descriptive words, if you can paint a picture of what it is that you're making in one sentence, then you will leave a much stronger impression on somebody when you talk to them or when they look at your game. So if you're submitting a game, having the first short sentence that describes your game really sum that game up. You kind of signpost to someone whether or not they should be interested in it. So that's one thing that I wrote down. The other thing for talking about comparison and comparative games, kind of conflating a couple of pieces together in what was said there. Be working on the basis that if you are working with the publisher, then they are going to be looking for at least making a minimum of 5 times back what they're paying you to get the game made, or what they're paying you for the game to be made. And being careful about when you're looking at other games that are significant outliers. So if you're making a Vampire Survivors alike, then Vampire Survivors is probably a very bad comparison because it's made exceptional sales. But if you do things, I can't remember the name of the guy, the process, but ultimately, if you look at a Steam review and look at all the number of reviews that a game has got, and then multiply that game by 40, that will give you a pretty good idea of how many copies that game has sold on Steam. So if you work around and then multiply that number by the retail price of the game or the price of the game on the site, you start to get an idea of how much money that game has made. If you then divide that number by 5, you then get a pretty good idea of how much it costs to make. I mean, it's a very, very blunt instrument. But if you can work around that, and if you're working to a budget, multiplying it by 5 and looking at that as the income, then looking at games that are similar or have a similar audience to your game that have made the amount of money that's necessary for your game to make, then you can really begin to dig into what your actual competitors are. I don't know if that's useful or not, but it's certainly something I wrote down. Horrible, dry mathematics piece when everyone wants to be making a lovely game. I mean, I mean, make it, always make a game. And really early on we talked about it as well. Is really decide what you want from your game. Are you making a game for you, or are you making a game for commercial success? Because both of those things are valid. But when you make a game for you, you are ultimately making art. Art can become incredibly valuable, or more often than not valuable at all. Okay, so we don't seem to have any more questions.
I think one of the things I was going to add, I think, is a lot of people think about the performative nature of pitching. So they think it's solely about the moment that they meet the scout and that moment they get to pitch. And although that can be important, I don't think it's as important as people think, because there's this processing that happens behind. And actually being a scout's quite a challenging job. I mean, it kind of sounds really simple, but they've still got to pick out the things that are going to work and the things that the other departments within a publisher are excited about. So it's understanding that it's hard for them, and so if you provide the right information at the right time, and you're authentic and just yourself, you don't necessarily have to hire someone in who can give a big performance. It's more about your knowledge and the depth of knowledge, and the depth of knowledge comes from the thinking that you do before you put the pitch deck together, rather than putting the pitch deck together and then justifying it. So if you can go through that thinking and understand what they do and deconstruct it and then build it back on the other side, I think you get a more precise pitch deck, and one that will resonate in the right ways with the scout for the limited time that they get to speak with you and to see the game itself. I'm really interested in Queen Bitch. I just think that's a great name. Just looking down the list of, I can't wait till you do the subtitles on that. On the names on the Discord. I'm hoping we get a message from them. I think that's fabulous.
It's from the icon wearing a significant beard.
They're too shy to open their mic.
They are. Just going to see if they're going to write a comment. So if anyone wants to talk about even genres that people think are exciting at the moment, or we're certainly seeing, I mean, horror always carries on, seeing quite a lot around simulation and management. I think because once you have an audience base, they'll often buy a lot of multiple products in that area. So that's been quite strong for us. On some of submission calls, more often than not, they're talking about the genres they don't, rather than the genres that they do want. So there's most indie publishers find both driving and sports very challenging, mainly because those sort of markets are cornered and they tend to involve a license. We also have 3 of those. That one is about doing physical versions of games. So if you've got a game that's released that's done quite well, then Super Rare will do a box copy of that and sell that through retail. We also have Cando Factory. So if your game didn't do as well as you'd hoped through your own sales, they do a discovery boost. They're an ex-Sega team. They have lots of techniques they use for discoverability. So they will support your game, and through increased sales, you share the revenue with those guys. So that's quite an interesting model. And then we have Rainy Frog, who are based in Japan. So if you have a game that's done quite well on PC, and by well I mean it's generated a level of sales within that genre, so it doesn't need to be a massive success, then they are looking to support the release of ports, console ports, and they're based in Japan, so particularly close relationship with Nintendo, and they're a real specialist, Japan specialist. So if you have a game that you think will do very well in that market, it's done okay on PC, but you'd really like to put it out on console, then they're a support publisher who can deal with that side of things. It's a big fan of Nintendo.
There's a question from Kadios. Do you have any thoughts on the state of single-player adventure games right now and the viability of pitching them to publishers?
It's a good question. I think single player, I think their thinking around single player has changed quite a lot. I certainly think that we could help by making that more visible in what we're doing. We have very few publishers who won't take single player games at the moment. So I think that's quite strong. Do you have a different opinion, Matt? Or
What I'm doing in the background while you're talking is I'm just looking at the Steam top 250 just to see what's at the top there, and well, I mean, kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th, 8th down. You've got games like The Witcher 3, which is a single-player adventure, Phasmophobia and stuff like that. Driving game. Hades, I think, is. Portal 2 is always at the top there, and that's ultimately it has a significant two-player part to it, but it's still a first-person, one-person play game predominantly. Undertale still there. Just these games are still in the top played games, so they are still selling. What else is here? Things that I certainly know about.
With all of this, it's important to create an evidence base behind what you're doing. And no publisher knows everything. So if you can make a strong case, they'll obviously tell you when you're wrong, or in their opinion you're wrong. But if you feel that there is a market, and we'll certainly try and get some more detail on that from the publishing partners we're working with, then it's something. Go on.
No. It's just in relation to that answer. It is there is a huge resource of information out there, and the evidence is there. So it's kind of looking at what is selling well, looking at what has sold or has a long tail as well. So games that have been available for a while, that are still in. And not even top 100s. If you look at the top 500 games, let's say on Steam, the 500th highest selling game is probably still making significant amounts of money. So kind of understanding what's going on there and using research tools, and going back to what Gina said about using Gen AI tools. I use ChatGPT and Claude on and off to really dig into the Steam top 100, top 500, just to see what's there, and use it to make estimations about revenue and things like that from the games that are there. So the tools are there and are free, which is nice.
I see Alice has just joined. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's implied already, but I just wanted to make sure that it's probably possible to mark yourself or search for publishers that do, for example, specifically porting or localization or something like that.
Yeah, and I think everything's always about the right fit. And I think before you go into to start pitching, you have to have a really good idea who's on your target list, to understand the kind of budgets that they're working towards, and the kind of games that they like to sign. I think both of those, the budgets they like to sign is really hard to find, and that's why we're particularly particularly keen on doing this submission calls, so we start exposing how much money people are looking to spend and the level of investment, because most of them won't tell you that. So we'll keep putting that information out as much as we can. We can persuade publishers to trust us with that. But it does seem to be going up, and in the conversations that we've had, there also seems to be a gap in games between 3 and 10 million, which people haven't been talking about those size budgets for a while. And everyone's been told to look at under $150. And everyone's sort of been obediently doing that. But if you've got a game of a bigger size, so from 1 to 10 million, please talk to us, because we do have publishers searching. And I think we only have 17 of those on our system.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of scale, we've got 450 developers now on Pitchify, which is sort of attracting more publishers the more we get. But we'll always have a free tier for developers. It's important to us. That education piece, kind of going back to the Nina thing, is really important for us to be transparent over the kind of information that publishers are looking for and investors. And we do have and early round investors on the platform.
Also building some new facilities as well that will, let's say, alert people that are on the system. Publishers and investors can come onto our system and can put together very, very specific, multiple very specific search criteria, and the system will tell them if a game hits that search criteria, even if they're not on the system at the time. So being very clear about the stuff that we've talked through in this presentation, or Gina's talked through in this presentation, and ensuring you're hitting the questions around market size, market opportunity, particularly winning features and USPs. We have at least, there is an OEM that works quite a hardware manufacturer that works quite closely with us, that will not even look at a game if the developer of that game does not know what their winning features are, or hasn't been very clear about them. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes. Any pressing questions? Get them in.
Looks like.
I wrote another thing down, actually, that's something from my history as a game developer working with publishers. That Gina talked about the fact that one of the very last stages, once you're past a green light meeting, is contractual negotiations. I learned relatively quickly as a jobbing developer, let's say, then kind of knowing where your red lines are around contract items and contract clauses, doing a bit of research and understanding the way that advances are earned out, and the way that your share is calculated, is worth knowing early, because you can ask questions. So once you're in a position where a scout has shown interest in your product, they will often know. So you can set down some questions about where, what kind of contractual negotiations they will want. It's always worth understanding the end game from the moment you enter.
And the three most vital things in a contract is the royalty rate in which you recoup. People tend to focus on the royalty rate in which you share profit, but you need to get to that point. So how quickly you recoup that is vitally important, and people often forget that one and allow that one to be much lower than it should be. Marketing commitment. Everyone might love your game when they sign it, but they may feel that they've got a stronger game in their portfolio closer to release. So making sure that they've committed to some financial spend on your marketing plan is really, really important. And the final one is the process for signing off milestones. And I would always ensure that you have a level of deemed approved, so that if you submit your milestone and you hear nothing back for 2 weeks, or that you've submitted it 3 times and you believe you've delivered stuff, having some way to push that through so that the payment happens, rather than just being ghosted by your publisher, is essential. You may be working with an incredible producer when you sign, and they may leave and you may be left in the wilderness, or you don't get them replaced. You still have to pay your bills. So having a mechanism that allows that to work that's fair is also vital.
Also, on the flip side of that, to consider when you are working with those clauses, is what happens when they don't comply, and what your get out is. Because again, that's something that's often forgotten about. Is that if you're in this kind of limbo, left in a limbo by a publisher, what are your courses of action that you can take? Because sometimes they can be very one-sided. Another question. Hello, it is from Alice R. We're at a very early stage in our game, building out our first demo now. So just here to absorb all the knowledge I can, as I've never been involved in the publishing side of games dev before. Not a question, just wanted to say hi. Well, thank you very much for that, Alice.
I wanted to ask more about the process of submitting and the milestones.
Sorry, I'm muting myself. I was coughing. I will share the slides as well, so that you can run through the process. And again, if you want to sign up for free on the site and run through all the questions, you don't have to put your game live. You can keep it in draft, and you can have up to 3 games that you can play around with. So again, it's just a checklist. For us, one of our core of setting up the business was education. I think there's no real way for people to find out this information, so that's why we think it's so important to make it available for free.
So yeah, just in answer to that, that's what a number of people are doing. Actually, we've had quite a lot of really good feedback from developers recently, saying that once they've come in and started looking at the form, it's 170 odd questions now, I think, in both company it's a lot, and they're all there because we've been asked by our publisher partners and investor partners to ask those questions. Or been told that they're the things that they will be doing and thinking about during their due diligence process. So going through and kind of really looking at what's in there and understanding, when we explain as clearly as we possibly can why those questions are being asked as well. And so yes, I mean, feel free to sign up. It is completely free. You don't have to push the game live. But feedback we've been getting from people saying that there were so many things in there that they didn't know were necessary.
And just to say, if you sign up through a domain, a shared domain, so if you have a company domain, you don't have to have a company, you can then have all your team members sign up and access the same profile. So different people can fill in different pieces, and again, that's still free. You just control your team and your admin through the site. We just wanted to make it available in a sensible way because there's so much to answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, add Gina. We're on LinkedIn. Find us.
Oh yeah.
Add us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we took a brief look at the platform before with Gina before we agreed on this, and yeah, it looked like something that it would be useful for anybody to just feel that out and think the thoughts. So yeah, I do think it looked very useful. So thank you for creating it.
My pleasure. And just to say, we're adding a few calculators on there, first on the publisher side, but a lot of the questions about break-evens and stuff, once you've filled that in soon, you'll be able to press a button and understand how that may be viewed by a publisher and investor. So just helps with the maths, and particularly around assumptions and how you make assumptions on, an average sales price or global tax, or we'll provide defaults for that. but that you can change.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Okay, we've gone by the hour. So
I
if
hope
you've
that
got
was
any other
helpful.
questions, sign up. Come find us.
Hey, Greg, this was great. Thank you so much.